I'm playing something almost every week, and sometimes I want to talk about it and give you a vertical slice. So stick with me for some lightning reviews. This week on the chopping block. This week, I've been playing Digimon Survive. I'll be honest here, I haven't really engaged with the Digimon series in any significant degree since I was in my mid-teens, which is 20 years ago at this point, and I'll kindly ask the passage of time to stop personally attacking me. Jokes aside, I initially took interest in this game from trailers I saw because it made the game look absolutely hysterical. I'm not going to actually play the live trailer because the last time I played a trailer with my Hot Wheels review, in spite of it being a clear and blatant example of fair use under copyright, Mattel decided to claim my video, and YouTube is an incompetent f***wit of a platform that will forever be obsequious to large corporations. However, based off these still images from the trailer, you may be able to understand why I thought that this Digimon game was going to be a mixture of murder mystery and dating sim. Not seriously, but I have seen stranger games published, although I'm pretty sure Bandai Namco is smart enough to not give validation to some of the stranger communities around the internet. Jab at the furry community aside, the very start of the game seemed to be paced alright by giving us a brief pretext of what was going on, and then sending us straight into the most basic battle tutorial. Unfortunately, once the battle tutorial was over, I was confronted with the fact that this game is very heavy on the dialogue. I was quickly made bored out of my skull, reading the dialogue text in about a quarter of the time that it took for the voice acting to conclude, and gathering the point of the dialogue well in advance of the game's intention. I haven't played a lot of visual novels in the past other than that one joke review, but if this is typical of the genre, then I can thoroughly conclude that it is not for me. It takes forever to establish basic points, and whoever was in charge of the writing should have sent an editor into this game with waiters while dual-wielding chainsaws. To me, Digimon was at its strongest when it leaned into its anime incarnations, and I wouldn't have minded watching anime cutscenes instead of having the false sense of interactivity by just having to press a button and look at text boxes continually scroll. However, the sheer amount of text is not my only complaint, but it's the fact that many of the characters introduced are very immersed in standard anime character tropes. The bad boy, and the lovable companion to keep them in check. The doofy childhood friend, the level-headed sensible one. The quiet mysterious one that cares for their sibling. The weird sibling. After taking an hour to establish that this Digimon game is a Digimon game, we finally got into the second combat scenario, which was still heavily tutorialized, but after having almost drowned in dialogue, it was a welcome change. It was also a relief seeing more characters introduced to the game that may not have been unique writing-wise, but stylistically they were far more appealing. Or maybe I was just borderline falling asleep and was latching onto any sense of change that presented itself. The game also wasn't hurt by the fact that I found myself enjoying turn-based strategy games like Final Fantasy Tactics, Pokemon Conquest, or XCOM Enemy Unknown in the past. However, once the battles and repertoire of creatures are reintroduced, it doesn't stop the game from front-loading excessive dialogue and snail-paced story progression. What's even worse is the fact that once I got into the groove of looking forward to the battles to break up the story, every once in a while a battle would saddle me with an AI-controlled NPC in an escort mission that decided they wanted to figure out what fists and rocks tasted like, and proceeded to run into a crowd of enemies which forced me to lose the battle having to start over. Nonetheless, I plowed on and eventually came across some intrigue in the plot. Even with my limited experience in the franchise as a whole, I can tell you the basics are still adhered to in the early story. A motley crew of middle schoolers find themselves in a scenario where they've been transported to a strange yet mildly familiar world full of monsters that become your companions, and they mutually grow and get stronger both metaphorically and literally. The visual novel dialogue and exposition is also occasionally broken up with segments of minimal interaction in the form of exploration, massive quotation marks, that's little more than navigating drop-down menus or dragging an icon around the screen in order to take a picture with an in-game camera or highlight an exclamation mark over another character because interacting with that person is now the necessary step to move the plot along. Additionally, every once in a while you'll be given a choice to endear yourself to one of the characters with dialogue trees. It may have made a difference, but I was so focused on just getting through the dialogue at every instance that I could not have cared less about how highly they regarded me. Finally, I get that it's a staple of the visual novel genre, but all the while I was playing, I couldn't help but think to myself that all the visual assets repeat ad nauseum for the sake of budgetary constraint and or focus on other elements. In that sense, I get why they don't have anime cutscenes to portray the story, but it would have been a f***load more expedient. That being said, my rant on the story is done. In the endeavor of keeping this review spoiler-free, I'll not be touching on the plot anymore since this thing is so plot-heavy with dead weight that you could argue the necessity of earth-moving equipment to put the disc in the console. Gameplay-wise, for the turn-based strategy portions, I'm finding that it's rather difficult for that to get ruined for me. Hell, after a while at the start, it was the only thing keeping me playing. I don't claim to be a master strategist or intellectual, but I do find some enjoyment in watching the battle play out and anticipating moves and counter-moves similar to a game of chess. The game introduces deeper levels of the mechanics as you go through, including the ability to pacify and recruit certain enemies, positional, elemental, and equipment advantages, along with your ability to unlock power-ups and evolutions for your companions, and that's not even touching on the RPG progression level-up system. For me at least, this is absolutely where the bulk of my engagement with this title came from. To conclude, if you like the previously mentioned games like Final Fantasy Tactics or Pokemon Conquest, then this will check a few of your boxes. Just be aware that you'll be having to tread through waist-high linguistic runoff for upwards of a half hour just to experience a single battle at the very start, and the pace doesn't improve much from there. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to go play Pokemon Conquest for a bit. Yeah. This is much better.